Good evening, everybody. Happy Wednesday. Hope your midweek hump day is going well so far. We've got some pretty big NFL news, and we've also got some smaller pieces of NFL news that I think all ties together into one particular theme that I want to talk about because it does affect the Seahawks. So we're going to start with the big news. We're going to go on to the other pieces of news, and then I'm going to tie it all together. Quick reminder though, I should be going live on Twitch tonight on Fire Emblem. Should be in the next 2 or 3 hours. So hope to see you guys over there. We're going to grind on Fire Emblem probably all night. If I have to change my plans, I will let you guys know on Twitter. But yeah, Twitch tonight, Fire Emblem. Okay, so the big news was Tom Brady announced his retirement earlier today. He is officially done with football, and he claims this time the retirement is for good. And unlike last year, when Tampa Bay was kind of falling all over themselves to try to retain him after he announced his retirement, I don't think that's going to happen this year. I don't think anybody's going to be falling all over themselves trying to lure Tom out of retirement because he didn't have a very good season. And I do think that after the season that he had last year, he is probably actually done this time. And I do have to give him some credit here. I thought he was going to cling on to the NFL until he was literally unplayable. I thought he was going to hang around for like 3 or 4 years where he was just terrible, but he couldn't accept it. Didn't happen. He had one bad year and was like, okay, that's enough. I'm out. So he's retired from the NFL. He's a player that I've never particularly liked, never really rooted for. But I do think there is something to be said here for, given the situation that he was in, where he had just lost his marriage over this, where he had announced his retirement and then come back and had some semi-viable excuses for why this year didn't go so well. He could have come back. He could have been like, I've gone too far. I've already lost my marriage. I've already come back after retiring the first time. I got to keep going until either I start playing better or until I'm so bad nobody will touch me. Didn't happen. He had one bad year and peaced out. So Tom Brady retired. So that's the first thing. Second thing I want to talk about here is this announcement from the Bears. Now, obviously, they can't really do anything to put this in stone until they actually trade their pick. But reportedly, the Bears have decided to move forward with Justin Fields as the franchise quarterback and will be looking to trade the first overall pick. Now, this has a direct effect on the Seahawks, and it'll be interesting to see if they trade below the number 5 pick or if they trade above it. If they trade below it, that frees up more opportunities for the Seahawks to have choices at number 5. So this is definitely interesting on that level as a Seahawks fan. If they trade down with like the Colts and they end up picking at number 4, then nothing really changes all that much. But if they trade down to like number 7 or number 8 or number 9, that really frees stuff up for the Seahawks, where they will be able to much more likely have access to a Jalen Carter or a Will Anderson and probably not end up sitting there at number 5 with the best player on the board being Will Levis. So, and by the way, I do believe it is Levis. I always say Levis, but apparently it is Levis. So who the Bears trade with is definitely significant, but the fact that they are willing to trade, apparently, period, is definitely a big deal. But the other element here is that Justin Fields is no longer going to be on the market. Justin Fields will be a Bear in 2023. That's the point here. So any team out there that maybe wanted a quarterback that doesn't want to necessarily draft one or doesn't have the draft pick to get one, Justin Fields is off the board. You can't trade for him. And the final thing that I want to talk about here is this announcement also from Dov Kleiman of Twitter. Brock Purdy needs Tommy John surgery and is expected to miss about a year, which would mean he basically wouldn't be able to play at all in 2023. He would miss the whole season if this is the case. Now, this report has been disputed. John Lynch has actually already gone out and said that he believes that Brock Purdy will be good in 6 months. Basically meaning he won't miss anything. He won't miss any training camp, any meaningful preseason. He's ready to go for the start of the season. So these are obviously two very contradictory reports. Kleiman's, it's not Kleiman, it's this doctor, Mark Dickens, who believes that he's going to miss an entire calendar year. And then you have John Lynch saying, no, that's BS. He's going to miss 6 months and he'll be fully ready to go for the entire 2023 season. So that we're not quite sure about yet. Only time will tell. But the point that I'm trying to make here is that these announcements are doing two things. They are limiting the number of available quarterbacks this offseason, and they are widening the number of teams that may need a quarterback in the offseason. So while we now have a team like the 49ers, who are probably going to need at least a capable quarterback, if not two capable quarterbacks brought in, and then you've got guys like Tom Brady removing themselves from the market and the Bears removing Justin Fields from any kind of consideration. So put those two things together and you have a seller's market. What do I mean by that? Well, take a look at the list of NFL teams right now. Think about which teams are going to need a quarterback. Let's go through the list here. How many teams going into this offseason are going to need a quarterback? AFC East, definitely the Jets. The Jets need a quarterback in the worst way. And honestly, the Dolphins, with Tua's injury situation, probably need to make sure they have a capable backup, like a borderline starting quality backup, like what they had in 2022 with Bridgewater. So that's, you could call that 1.5 teams. The Ravens are either going to keep Lamar, which would take Lamar off the market, or they're going to need a quarterback because I don't think they can rock with Tyler Huntley. So that's another team right there. Houston absolutely needs a quarterback. The Colts absolutely need a quarterback. The Titans could move off of Tannehill, but if they do that, then Tannehill will be available for another team. So if the Titans become a QB-needy team, then they're going to be adding another QB to the pool. So that's kind of, I'm indifferent on that. AFC West, you've got the Raiders, but they're going to be adding Derek Carr to the mix if they end up deciding to move on from him. So if the Raiders need a quarterback, it'll be because they added another quality quarterback to the pool. So either way with them, it doesn't really matter how you want to count it. Okay, let's look at the NFC. The Giants, either they're going to commit to Daniel Jones or they're going to need a quarterback. The Commanders, they definitely need a quarterback, and they don't have any meaningful commitments to quarterbacks going into 2023 because I looked it up. Carson Wentz can be cut this offseason with 0 dead cap, which I'm sure they're going to do because he played so bad last year. So if Washington wanted to stick with Taylor Heineke, which I don't think they do, that would be removing Heineke from the market anyway. So they need a quarterback. The NFC North, now, it seems like if the Packers move on from Rodgers, which is becoming a possibility here, they're just going to go with Jordan Love. So I don't necessarily believe they need a quarterback. I would say, though, that if the Packers decide to move forward with Jordan Love, they would probably feel obligated to get a high-end backup in there to back him up because they don't know what they're going to get out of Jordan Love. And to be perfectly honest, I'm not impressed with Jordan Love, and I don't think they are either. And while we're at it, a team like the Bears that has a quarterback who is as prone to injury as Justin Fields is, they might want to get a high-end backup as well, so that's also a consideration here. NFC South, a lot of these teams, maybe all of these teams need quarterback upgrades. Falcons don't look committed to Ritter. He didn't play very well last year. Panthers, I mean, Darnold's a free agent either way, so either they bring back Darnold or they need a new quarterback. The Saints, it doesn't seem like they like Winston anymore. Dalton's a free agent. And Tampa Bay now literally doesn't have a real quarterback on their roster. It's just Kyle Trask and literally nobody else. And then, of course, the NFC West, probably not. But if Stafford retires, the Rams need a quarterback. And even if that quarterback ends up being Baker Mayfield, they need to re-sign him. And the 49ers, if Brock Purdy is truly out of commission for all of 2023, they've got Trey Lance, who can't stay healthy, who has already missed. He's basically not played football in 3 years when you think about it, because the last 2 years in the NFL, plus the last year in college, he barely played football those 3 years combined. They can't have him be the only guy. So, honestly, if Brock Purdy's out of commission, the Niners might need to bring in 2 capable quarterbacks. And even if Brock Purdy's ready to go, you could argue they need to bring in 1. And then, of course, the Seahawks, who literally don't have a quarterback under contract going into 2023. Either they're going to keep Geno or they're going to need a quarterback. Now, there are a collection of quarterbacks in this draft that should be ready to start day one, or could start day one at least, right? Guys like C.J. Stroud, Bryce Young, Will Levis, probably one or two other guys ends up starting day one, but probably not Anthony Richardson, definitely not Hendon Hooker, so really it might just be those three guys. Maybe one other guy ends up making themselves available as a day one starter the way that Russell Wilson did back in 2012, but there's probably at most going to be like 4 rookie quarterbacks ready to start day one, right? So let's look at the quarterbacks who are now available in free agency. All right, and this is why I say it's going to be a little bit of a seller's market here. Okay, Brady's retired. He's off the board. Forget about him. You've got a lot of quarterbacks that are just kind of like either they're high-end backups or bad starters. Baker Mayfield, Sam Darnold, Jimmy Garoppolo, who is the guy who I think somebody's going to bite on because he was playing pretty well before he got hurt. Now, as far as I'm concerned, Brock Purdy exposed Garoppolo as being crappy, but I think somebody's going to fall for the performance he had in those, 8 or 9 games before he got hurt, and give him starter money and plan to make him the starter. But to me, he's another guy who's kind of on the fringe of being either a high-end backup or a low-end starter. Teddy Bridgewater. These are all guys who you don't really want to bring in as a starter. Go down the list here. Daniel Jones, admittedly, wherever Daniel Jones ends up, he will probably end up as a starter, and he might even get big money. But I don't think anybody's looking at him as like a top-end starter here, somebody that they feel really good about bringing in. Case Keenum is a pure backup. Mason Rudolph, Jacoby Brissett, high-end backup, but a backup nonetheless. Of course, you have Geno Smith, but that's kind of what I'm leading into here. You keep going down the list. Eventually, you get down to Taylor Heinicke and Lamar Jackson. Maybe Taylor and definitely Lamar, but what else, right? Like, nothing else here is good. Maybe Huntley, but to me, Huntley is a backup. To me, Huntley, he didn't really play that well this year, by the way. And by the way, he's restricted. Baltimore will probably keep him around for cheap. So, really, when you're trying to look in this free agency pool for a starting caliber quarterback, the only guys who really stand out as being like, yeah, that guy's definitely worthy of starting in this league right now, you have Geno Smith, you have Daniel Jones, and I actually think there are some questions around Daniel Jones, but somebody out there will say, yeah, that guy's a starter, and Lamar Jackson, who you have to trade for. Now, it's possible that Aaron Rodgers will switch teams this offseason via trade. People have been talking about that. Derek Carr's probably going to get cut, and he'll probably start somewhere, right? But when you take a look at this, there are more open areas. There are more open spots around the league. There are more QB-needy teams than there are available quality quarterbacks, right? Because like I said, a lot of these names that I've already mentioned in this video, Baker, Darnold, Garoppolo, Bridgewater, Keenum, Rudolph, Brissett, they're probably going to end up as like high-end backups in this league. I don't think very many of those guys, probably only Jimmy Garoppolo, will end up as being nominal starters going into the league. So this does 2 things. One, it probably increases the value of Geno Smith. Sorry, but I know there isn't a lot of money out there, but what this means is that the teams that have money, and there aren't that many of them, but there are a handful of teams that have money, they're going to be more motivated to bid on Geno Smith if they want a veteran quarterback who's ready to go now. Like, we understand that some of the teams that I talked about that need a quarterback, they're definitely going to find theirs in the draft. They're going to pursue a new quarterback in the draft. But the other teams, there are going to be a lot of teams out there looking for veterans, and you can see that the options are starting to dwindle. Brady is off the board. You can't trade for Justin Fields now, it looks like. And a lot of these guys are just like high-end backup types. So if you want a good, proven veteran quarterback, your options are now kind of limited to Geno Smith, Daniel Jones, Lamar Jackson, who you have to trade for, and maybe Jimmy Garoppolo and maybe Taylor Heinicke. So that's going to increase the asking price for Geno in a contract. But And this is the upshot here. This is maybe the thing that people are going to get excited about. It also increases what you could expect to get if you tag and trade Geno Smith, which is going to become a popular conversation topic. So, like, just as an example here, just looking at some of these teams, all right? Now, forget about the money for a second here. Some of these teams are going to struggle to get under the cap. Some of these teams are going to struggle to get together the money to do things like this. But let's say you're like the New York Jets, and you know you need a quarterback. Let's say you can't trade for Rodgers. Let's say that falls through. You can't give up enough picks for it. The Packers decide they want the whole world, and you don't want to give them the whole world. By the way, I think it would be a terrible trade. You're basically giving up 2 first-rounders plus for what you hope is 1 good year of Rodgers because he's so old. I think it's a terrible idea. But if you're the Jets, you don't want to trade for Rodgers because he's going to cost 2 first-rounders. You don't want to trade for Lamar because he's going to cost probably more than 1 first-rounder. Maybe more. I don't know. I don't know what the Lamar trade value is going to be. To me, that's going to be an interesting litmus test. And then you're down to like, okay, we can go get Derek Carr out of free agency because he's going to get cut, right? You could go get Derek Carr. But if you don't get Derek Carr at that point, what are you down to here? You want to go over to the other New York team and get Daniel Jones? Why? Like, I know he had an okay season. I know he won a playoff game, but I don't think Daniel Jones is going to be heavily coveted by these teams. You want to go get Jimmy Garoppolo and have to deal with him getting hurt inevitably in the middle of the season anyway. Mayfield, Darnold, Bridgewater, like, it's not good. And as the Jets, you know that you are probably a quarterback away from competing, and you are probably also in a situation where if you don't make the playoffs, people are going to start losing their job. Robert Saleh might be coaching for his job this year. So at that point, you can either say, okay, let's go get Taylor Heineke, probably the best guy who's just going to be available for free, or you can trade a 2nd rounder plus maybe a 3rd or 4th rounder for Geno Smith. Maybe even you give up 1 first-round pick for Geno Smith because your first-round pick isn't super high. That's got to be pretty appealing, right? And even if the Jets say, okay, let's do the Taylor Heineke thing, that means that's one more team that's going to need a quarterback. Like, what about a team like Washington that likes a lot of the things they've got going for them? They've got good running backs, good receivers, they've got a good defensive line. A lot of things on that team are cooking, but they don't have a quarterback. So you don't trade for Rodgers, you don't trade for Lamar, Heineke's gone, and honestly, he wasn't playing that well for you. Your options are really limited. It's like either you get Derek Carr or you trade maybe a 1st rounder or a 2nd and a 3rd for Geno. So I think this increases the number of teams that are going to be going after Geno in a tag and trade, and that could definitely play to the Seahawks' advantage. So that's the upshot of the quarterback market doing what it's doing. Let me know what you guys think. I'll see you guys later on Twitch tonight, I hope. Go Hawks.